Boarding pass. Now, and don't act cute with me.
Here's my Zone 1 pass. There's no reason to escalate this.
ID 2. You don't look like you belong in priority.
Say that again on camera, officer. That's bias, not reasonable suspicion.
The high-definition surveillance camera mounted above Gate 42 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport captured the entire scene in crisp 4K resolution. It recorded the rush of travelers, the families saying their goodbyes, and the business executives pacing while on conference calls. But mostly, it focused on the quiet stillness of the man sitting in seat 4A of the priority waiting area. Officer Kyle Braden had absolutely no idea that the man he was eyeing, a man he had already decided was out of place, was Marcus Thorne. He didn't know that Mr. Thorne had spent the last 28 years of his life as a senior civil rights prosecutor for the United States Department of Justice. He didn't know that the man in the bespoke charcoal suit had personally argued cases before the Supreme Court dismantling discriminatory practices in housing, voting, and law enforcement. All Officer Braden saw was a black man in an expensive suit sitting in a restricted area, and in his mind that didn't add up. Marcus Thorne wasn't bothering a soul. At 54 years old, he carried himself with the heavy, silent gravity of a man who had seen the worst of what the American legal system could do to the innocent. He was simply checking his emails on his tablet, preparing for a keynote speech he was scheduled to deliver in Washington, D.C. regarding Fourth Amendment violations in transit hubs. The irony of the moment would be laughable if the consequences weren't about to be so severe. Before we get into the details of this infuriating interaction, I need you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Are you in the US, Europe, Asia? And if you believe that nobody should be harassed simply for existing in a public space, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You are not going to want to miss how this story unfolds. It was a Tuesday morning, bright and busy. The terminal was flooded with sunlight. Marcus had cleared TSA pre-check without issue. He had visited the lounge for a coffee and had now settled at the gate to wait for boarding. He was a creature of habit. His suit was tailored perfectly to his frame, Italian wool understated but undeniably expensive. His leather folio was placed neatly on the empty seat beside him. He wasn't looking around nervously. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't clutching his bags. He was reading a brief on Terry versus Ohio. Officer Kyle Braden was patrolling the terminal. At 29 years old, Braden had been with the airport police for 4 years. He was known among his peers as proactive, a code word often used for officers who went looking for trouble where there wasn't any. He walked with his thumbs hooked into his tactical vest, scanning the crowd not for threats, but for targets. He saw Marcus Thorne. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the priority boarding pass sitting on the armrest, and for reasons that a federal investigation would later take 97 pages to explain, Braden decided that Marcus Thorne was a problem that needed solving. Braden stopped about 10 feet away. He watched Marcus for a solid minute. Marcus didn't look up. He was engrossed in his work. This lack of acknowledgement seemed to irritate Braden. In his experience, people usually noticed him. They got nervous. They looked away. Marcus did none of that. He just kept reading. Braden adjusted his belt, took a breath, and began to close the distance. He walked with a swagger that masked his insecurity, stepping over the legs of other passengers. His eyes locked on the man in the charcoal suit. The camera above recorded Braden's hand hovering near his radio, a subtle sign that he was already escalating the situation in his head before a single word was spoken. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was loud, projected to carry over the din of the terminal. Marcus Thorne finished the sentence he was reading, tapped the screen of his tablet to turn it off, and slowly raised his head. He didn't jump. He didn't look startled. He simply removed his reading glasses and looked Officer Braden in the eye. "Yes, officer, can I help you?" Marcus asked. His voice was a deep baritone, the kind of voice that commanded courtrooms and silenced lecture halls. "I need to see your boarding pass," Braden said, not asking but ordering. He didn't say please. He stood with his feet wide apart, blocking the light from the window, casting a shadow over Marcus. Marcus paused. He knew the law better than the officer standing in front of him knew the airport cafeteria menu. He knew that in a consensual encounter he was under no obligation to provide papers unless he was trying to pass a checkpoint. However, he also knew he was a black man in America, and he had a flight to catch. He decided to choose the path of least resistance for now. "Certainly," Marcus said. He picked up the printed boarding pass from the armrest and held it up. "Zone 1, priority boarding, seat 2A. Braden snatched the paper from Marcus's hand. He looked at it, flipped it over, and looked at it again. It was a valid ticket. It had Marcus's name on it. It matched the flight at the gate. A competent officer would have handed it back, apologized for the interruption, and walked away. But Braden wasn't looking for validation. He was looking for a confrontation. "ID," Braden demanded, holding on to the boarding pass. Marcus's demeanor shifted. The helpful traveler vanished, replaced instantly by the seasoned litigator. "Officer, I've shown you a valid boarding pass for this gate. I've already passed through TSA security where my identity was verified. Unless you have a specific articulable suspicion that I have committed a crime, am committing a crime, or am about to commit a crime, I am not required to present my identification to you." The air around them seemed to drop 10 degrees. Travelers nearby stopped their conversations. The typing on laptops ceased. Braden's face flushed a deep, angry red. He wasn't used to people using words like articulable. He was used to fear. "I got a report of a suspicious individual in this area matching your description. That gives me the right to identify you. So hand over the ID or we're going to have a problem." "A suspicious individual," Marcus repeated calmly. "Can you elaborate? What was the suspicious behavior? Was I shouting? Was I brandishing a weapon? Was I running?" "The report said a male subject loitering near the first-class lane who didn't look like he belonged there." Braden stammered, falling into the trap. "So the suspicion is that I don't look like I can afford a first-class ticket?" Marcus asked, his voice rising just enough so the surrounding passengers could hear. "Officer, that is not reasonable suspicion. That is bias, and under Brown versus Texas, you cannot stop and identify a citizen without objective facts linking them to criminal activity. You have none." Braden stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. His hand rested on his taser. "I'm not going to ask you again. Produce your identification or I will detain you for obstruction." A woman sitting 3 seats away, a young marketing executive named Jennifer, had already pulled out her phone. She held it steady, resting her elbows on her knees to keep the shot clear. She knew something was wrong. She had been sitting there for 20 minutes and had seen Marcus do nothing but drink coffee and read. She hit record. "Sir, you are escalating this," Braden said, his voice tightening. "You are refusing a lawful order." "It is not a lawful order," Marcus corrected him, not moving from his seat. "It is an unlawful demand based on a constitutionally invalid pretext. I am a ticketed passenger waiting for my flight. I am not impeding your duties. I am not causing a disturbance, you are. I am asking you clearly and for the record. Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" Braden looked around. He saw the eyes of 50 people on him. He saw Jennifer's phone lens pointed directly at his face. He felt his control slipping, and for a man like Braden, that was intolerable. He couldn't back down now. If he walked away, he looked weak. If he doubled down, he felt he could reassert his dominance. He chose the latter, a decision that would cost the city nearly $1 million. "Yes, you are being detained," Braden snapped. "Stand up." "For what crime?" Marcus remained seated. "Disorderly conduct and obstruction of justice." Braden improvised. "You're making a scene. You're upsetting other passengers." "The only person upset here is you, officer," Marcus said. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't moved. Look around you. These people aren't scared of me. They are watching you harass a citizen. If you arrest me, you are violating my Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable seizure. You are also violating Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code, deprivation of rights under color of law. Do you really want to go down that road? Braden didn't know what Title 18 was. He didn't care. All he heard was a challenge. He reached out and grabbed Marcus by the arm, yanking him upward. "That's it! You're done! Stand up!" Braden shouted. Marcus didn't resist physically. He allowed himself to be pulled to his feet, but he made sure his body language remained non-threatening. He wanted the camera to catch every inch of his compliance and every ounce of Braden's aggression. "I am complying under duress," Marcus stated clearly for the camera. "I am not resisting. I am stating that this is an unlawful arrest." "Turn around," Braden barked, spinning Marcus roughly. "Hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs was loud in the quiet gate area. People gasped. "He didn't do anything," someone shouted from the back. "He was just sitting there," another voice chimed in. Braden ignored them. He cinched the cuffs tight, too tight. Marcus winced but didn't cry out. He stood tall, his posture perfect even in restraints. He looked like a statue of dignity amidst a storm of incompetence. "You're under arrest," Braden said, breathing heavily, as if he had just run a marathon. He grabbed Marcus's arm and pushed him forward. "Let's go." Have you ever seen a police officer make a mistake so big you almost felt sorry for them? Type yes or no in the comments. Because what happened next was painful to watch for anyone who understands the dynamics of power. Braden marched Marcus Thorne through the terminal. This wasn't a back alley arrest. This was a parade. They walked past the duty-free shops, past the food court, past hundreds of travelers. Braden held Marcus's arm high, forcing him to walk at an awkward angle, parading his catch like a trophy hunter. He wanted everyone to see that he was in charge, that he was keeping the airport safe. But the crowd wasn't cheering. They were staring in confusion. They saw a well-dressed, middle-aged man with graying temples being manhandled by a young, flushed cop. Marcus kept his head high. He looked straight ahead, his face a mask of stone. Inside his mind was racing, cataloging every detail: the tightness of the cuffs, the lack of Miranda warnings, the public humiliation. He was calculating damages. He was drafting the opening paragraph of his complaint. Jennifer, the woman who had recorded the encounter, was following them at a safe distance, still filming. She wasn't the only one. Dozens of phones tracked their path. Braden was oblivious. He was running on adrenaline and ego. "You really messed up, buddy," Braden whispered in Marcus's ear as they walked. "Thought you could talk your way out of it. You think a suit makes you special?" Marcus didn't respond. He saved his words. He knew that silence was often the loudest indictment. He knew that Braden was digging a hole so deep that he would never see the sun again. They reached the airport police substation located near the baggage claim. Braden swiped his keycard and shoved the heavy door open. He pushed Marcus inside, away from the public eye, into the sterile, fluorescent-lit world of the precinct. "Sit," Braden commanded, shoving Marcus onto a metal bench bolted to the floor. Marcus sat. He took a deep breath, composing himself. The humiliation of the walk was over. Now came the law. The substation was quiet. Sergeant Miller was behind the high desk. Miller was 58 years old, a veteran of the force who was counting the days to retirement. He had seen it all: drunks, fights, thefts. He looked up over his reading glasses as Braden strutted in with his prisoner. Miller frowned. He saw the expensive suit. He saw the calm demeanor. He saw the lack of intoxication. This didn't look like their usual clientele. "What do we got, Braden?" Miller asked, his voice weary. "Disorderly conduct, failure to obey, resisting." Braden listed off, tossing Marcus's leather folio onto the counter. "Guy wouldn't identify. Caused a scene at gate 42, thinking about adding and inciting a riot with the way he was talking." Miller looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back, his eyes sharp and intelligent. "Sir, Name and date of birth? Miller asked. My identification is in my folio, Marcus said calmly. Inside the left pocket. Miller pulled the leather case toward him. It was high-quality leather monogrammed. He unzipped it. Inside there were no crumpled receipts or gum wrappers. It was organized. There was a tablet, a legal pad with handwritten notes, and a slim leather wallet. Miller opened the wallet. The color drained from his face instantly. He didn't just stop. He froze. His eyes went wide behind his glasses. He looked at the ID card in the window. It wasn't a driver's license. It was a federal credential. United States Department of Justice. Marcus Thorne, Senior Prosecutor, Civil Rights Division. Next to the ID was a gold badge. A real one. Miller looked up at Marcus, then at Braden, then back at the badge. His hands started to shake slightly. Braden, Miller whispered. What? Braden was busy filling out the booking sheet, not looking up. Guy's a piece of work, Sarge. Trying to tell me about the law. Braden, Miller barked, snapping the younger officer to attention. What? Miller turned the wallet around and slammed it onto the counter. You arrested a federal prosecutor. You arrested a senior civil rights prosecutor from the DOJ. The room went dead silent. The hum of the computer servers seemed to get louder. Braden walked over to the desk. He looked at the badge. He looked at the ID. He read the words, Civil Rights Division. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had fueled him for the last 30 minutes evaporated, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. I didn't know, Braden stammered. He refused to show ID. He didn't say, I tried to tell you. Marcus spoke from the bench. His voice echoed in the small room. I asked you for your articulable suspicion. I cited Brown versus Texas. I warned you about Title 18. You chose not to listen. Miller stood up, moving quickly around the desk. Get those cuffs off him. Now. But Braden froze. Now! Miller screamed. Braden fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking so bad he dropped them. He picked them up, struggling to get the key into the lock on Marcus's wrists. The mechanism clicked. The cuffs fell away. Marcus rubbed his wrists. He stood up slowly. He didn't look at Braden. He looked directly at Sergeant Miller. I want the station commander here, Marcus said. Now. Captain Reynolds arrived in 4 minutes. He had been eating lunch when the call came in from Miller. The sergeant hadn't given details over the radio, just a code that meant severe administrative emergency. When Reynolds walked in and saw Marcus Thorne rubbing his wrists and Officer Braden staring at the floor like a scolded child, he knew his career was flashing before his eyes. Reynolds was a good cop, a decent administrator, but he knew a disaster when he saw one. He walked straight to Marcus. Mr. Thorne, Reynolds said, extending a hand. I am Captain Reynolds. I am incredibly sorry for this misunderstanding. There is no excuse. Marcus didn't shake the hand. He looked at it, then looked at Reynolds. This wasn't a misunderstanding, Captain, Marcus said coldly. This was a deprivation of rights. It was a kidnapping. It was an assault. Reynolds retracted his hand. I understand you're upset. You are free to go, of course. We will be handling this internally. Oh, you will be handling it internally, Marcus said. But that is the least of your worries. Marcus reached into his folio and pulled out a notepad. He clicked a gold pen. I want the following preserved immediately, Marcus said, writing as he spoke. I want the body camera footage from Officer Braden. I want the surveillance footage from Gate 42, the concourse, and the intake room. I want the dispatch logs from the initial suspicious person call, which I suspect doesn't exist. I want Officer Braden's disciplinary file. Mr. Thorne, we have protocols, Reynolds started. I am giving you a verbal spoliation notice, Captain. Marcus cut him off. If 1 second of that footage is deleted, lost, or corrupted, I will personally ensure that you are named as a co-conspirator in the federal lawsuit I am filing tomorrow morning. Do I make myself clear?" Reynolds swallowed hard. He looked at Braden, who was pale as a sheet. "Crystal clear, sir. Everything will be preserved." "Good." Marcus packed his things. He straightened his tie. He smoothed the wrinkles in his suit jacket. "I missed my flight," Marcus said. "We can rebook you," Reynolds offered quickly. "We can get you into the VIP lounge." "I don't want your lounge," Marcus said. "I want your badge numbers, all of you." He wrote them down. Then, without another word, Marcus Thorne turned and walked out of the substation. He didn't look back. He walked out into the terminal, hailed a cab, and went straight to the federal courthouse downtown. He had work to do. The video hit Twitter at 4:00 p.m. Jennifer had uploaded it with the caption, "Power-tripping cop arrests calm black man at O'Hare for nothing. Wait for the end." By 6:00 p.m. it had 50,000 views. By the next morning it had 4 million. The title had evolved. It was now trending as #FlyingWhileBlack. The visual of Marcus sitting calmly citing case law while Braden got increasingly aggressive and flustered was perfect internet fodder. It was a textbook example of escalation, but the real explosion happened when the identity of the suspect was revealed. Washington Post headline: Airport Police Arrest. Top DOJ Civil Rights Prosecutor for Sitting While Black. CNN breaking news. Justice Department announces inquiry into O'Hare Airport Police after viral arrest of senior prosecutor. Marcus filed his lawsuit on Thursday. It was a masterpiece of legal writing. It didn't just ask for damages, it asked for structural change. It alleged a pattern and practice of racial profiling at the airport. It cited statistics that the airport police had tried to keep hidden. The internal investigation was swift and brutal. Investigators pulled Braden's history. They found that in his 4 years, 85% of his suspicious person stops involved African American or Latino men. He had a history of escalating verbal encounters into arrests for disorderly conduct. He had 3 excessive force complaints that had been swept under the rug by previous supervisors. But this time there was no rug big enough to hide the mess. The suspicious person call that Braden claimed to have received, it didn't exist. Dispatch logs showed no call. Braden had lied. He had seen a black man in a suit in the priority lane, and his bias had filled in the rest. He fabricated the justification after the fact. The Department of Justice didn't just investigate the incident. They investigated the entire department. They found that the first-class profiling was a common tactic used by a specific squad of officers to fish for drug couriers. It was unconstitutional, it was racist, and it was about to end. 6 months later. The hearing room was packed. Officer Kyle Braden sat at a small table alone. His union representative had advised him to resign, but Braden's pride wouldn't let him. He faced the review board. The verdict was unanimous. Termination for cause. Decertification, meaning he could never work as a police officer in the state again. The board cited gross misconduct, fabrication of evidence, and violation of civil rights. Braden walked out of the hearing room a civilian. He refused to speak to the press. The lawsuit settled 2 weeks later. The city paid Marcus Thorne $850,000. It was one of the largest individual settlements for an unlawful detention in the airport's history. But Marcus didn't keep a dime. In a press conference held on the steps of the courthouse, Marcus announced the creation of the Thorne Legal Defense Fund. The entire $850,000 would go toward providing legal representation for indigent travelers who had been victims of racial profiling and unlawful stops. "Freedom of movement is a fundamental right," Marcus told the cameras. "It should not depend on the color of your skin or the price of your suit." The airport police entered into a consent decree with the DOJ. They were forced to implement mandatory bias training, body-worn cameras with strict penalties for non-compliance, and a civilian oversight board to review all stops. 1 year after the arrest, Marcus Thorne was back at O'Hare. He was at Gate 42. He was wearing the same charcoal suit. He sat in seat 4A. He watched the officers patrolling the terminal. He saw a pair of young officers walking the beat. They passed a young black man in a hoodie sitting near the window. They looked at him, paused, and then kept walking. Marcus watched them go. He took a sip of his coffee. The system was still imperfect. Bias still existed. But in this terminal, at this gate, things had changed. He had forced them to change. He opened his tablet and began to type. This story isn't just about one bad apple. It's about a system that protects those apples until someone with the power to fight back comes along. But what about the people who aren't federal prosecutors? What about the people who don't know the case law? That is why we share these stories. That is why we film. That is why we speak up. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, or if it gave you hope, please share it. Send it to a friend. Post it on your timeline, because the only way we stop this is by shining a light on it every single time. I'm curious. Do you think the punishment for Officer Braden was enough? Should he have faced criminal charges for the false arrest? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, know your rights, and never stop holding power accountable. I'll see you in the next one.